The door didn't just open, it exploded inward. 1 second I was sitting at my grandfather's old oak table, having a quiet conversation over coffee, and the next second the entire front door of my lake cabin splintered off the hinges like someone had kicked it with a battering ram. Wood cracked, glass rattled, cold lake air rushed into the room. For a moment, nobody moved. Then came the sound that everyone around Clearwater Lake had learned to recognize instantly. The sharp, aggressive click of expensive heels on hardwood floors. If you lived anywhere near our community, that sound meant only one thing: Delilah Cromwell, our HOA president, or as most of us privately called her, Karen. She didn't knock. She didn't apologize for destroying my front door. She didn't even slow down when she stepped over the broken wood scattered across my floor. Instead, she marched straight into my living room like she owned the property, holding her phone high in front of her face. The camera was pointed directly at me, and judging by the bright red live icon glowing on her screen, she wasn't just recording, she was broadcasting. "There, he is," she shouted dramatically into the phone, turning the camera toward me like she had just caught a criminal in the act. "This is the guy I've been warning everyone about." Behind her, sunlight poured through the destroyed doorway, lighting up floating dust and wood splinters drifting through the air. The comments on her live stream were already flying up the screen. Thousands of strangers watching the show, people typing things like, "Finally someone standing up to him. Call the police." Not times, HOA presidents don't mess around. Karen looked proud, victorious, like she just kicked down the door of some dangerous outlaw who'd been terrorizing the neighborhood. She slowly spun in a circle, giving her viewers a dramatic tour of my cabin, like she was exposing a crime scene. "There it is," she snapped, pointing her phone toward the lake through my window. "That illegal dock I've been talking about." Then she swung the camera toward my roof. "And look at those solar panels, completely unapproved installations." Then finally she turned the camera back toward me again. "And this man has ignored every HOA violation notice we've sent him for the past 6 months." Her voice echoed loudly through the cabin. Outside, you could hear a few curious neighbors beginning to gather, drawn by the noise and the shattered door. But what Karen didn't notice, what she was far too busy performing for her online audience to realize, was that the room she had just stormed into was not empty. I wasn't alone. 2 other people were sitting at the table with me, and unlike Karen, neither of them looked angry. Neither of them looked scared. They just watched her quietly, calm, observant, almost patient. Karen kept ranting, pacing around the room like a prosecutor delivering a courtroom speech. "You think you can just ignore community laws?" she shouted. "You think your property is above regulation?" Her phone camera moved wildly as she spoke, capturing every broken piece of wood, every shocked expression from the neighbors gathering outside. "Today," she announced proudly to her live stream audience, "we're exposing the truth about this guy." That's when the woman sitting across from me finally stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, and when she spoke, her voice was calm enough that it instantly cut through Karen's shouting. "Ma'am," she said, "before you continue, you might want to stop that live stream." Karen froze for half a second, then she laughed. A loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" The woman reached calmly into her blazer pocket and pulled out a leather identification wallet. She opened it, turned it so Karen's camera and all 3,000 of her viewers could see it clearly. The badge gleamed in the sunlight, and the room suddenly went very quiet. "My name," the woman said calmly, "is Patricia Williamson." She paused just long enough for the name to sink in. Then she finished the sentence that completely changed Karen's expression. "I'm the state attorney general." Karen's smile vanished. Her live stream audience watched in real time as the color drained from her face, because in the span of about 30 seconds, she had just kicked down a private door, trespassed onto private property, interrupted an official government meeting, and broadcast the entire thing live on the internet. And the worst part, we hadn't even called the police yet, because at that exact moment, 3 black SUVs were pulling into my driveway. She didn't just walk into my cabin, she announced a raid. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said dramatically, into her phone camera. She said dramatically, into her phone camera, panning it across my living room like she was filming a crime documentary. This is what happens when someone thinks the HOA rules don't apply to them. Her voice echoed through the cabin. Outside, the lake was calm. Birds were chirping. Inside, the atmosphere had completely changed. Because now she was standing in my house, broadcasting live to thousands of viewers, acting like she had just uncovered some massive scandal. And the wildest part, she hadn't even looked around yet. Her attention was locked entirely on me. "There he is," she said again, zooming the phone camera closer to my face. "The guy who's been illegally occupying this lake property for weeks." I leaned back in my chair slowly, trying to process what was happening. "Illegally occupying," I repeated. "Oh, don't play dumb," she snapped instantly. "You've ignored every HOA notice we sent, every violation letter, every fine." She lifted a thick envelope and waved it dramatically toward the camera. "I even have the documentation right here." Then she turned the phone back to herself, switching to a performative tone clearly meant for her live stream audience. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that destroys communities," she said. "People who think rules don't apply to them." Her viewers were apparently eating it up because she kept glancing at the screen and smirking. "Wow, look at the comments," she laughed. "Everyone's saying the same thing. Kick him out." I sighed quietly. This woman clearly thought she was the hero of some HOA reality show. But the truth? She had absolutely no idea what she had just walked into. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you just broke my door." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Don't try to turn this around. HOA bylaws give us the right to inspect properties that are in violation." "No," I replied. "They don't." Her smile tightened slightly. "Excuse me? You heard me?" She straightened her posture, clearly irritated that I wasn't panicking like she expected. Most people probably did. Most people probably got intimidated when the HOA president stormed into their house with a camera and an audience cheering her on. But I wasn't most people. And more importantly, I wasn't alone. She still hadn't noticed the other person sitting at the table. He had been quiet this entire time, calm, observing, watching everything unfold with the patience of someone who had seen this kind of behavior many times before. But Karen was too busy performing for her live stream to notice him. "So, let's talk about your violations," she continued loudly. She started pacing around the room now, pointing the camera at random things like a detective gathering evidence. "This dock extension, completely unapproved." She spun toward the window and zoomed in. "The fire pit outside, also illegal." Then she turned back to me. "And let's not forget the biggest issue. This property was supposed to be vacant during the ownership transfer period." She leaned closer to the camera dramatically. "But guess what we found?" Her voice dropped into a whisper, like she was revealing a conspiracy. "Someone secretly living here." The comments on her live stream must have exploded because she suddenly grinned wider. "Oh yeah," she said, nodding at the phone. "People are saying we should call the sheriff." Then she pointed directly at me. "Don't worry," she added smugly. "That's next." I couldn't help it. I chuckled. Just a small laugh. But it completely threw her off. Her eyebrows furrowed instantly. "What's so funny?" she demanded. I leaned forward slightly. "You're threatening to call law enforcement," I said. "That's right, in a house you just forced your way into." Her smile faded. "I didn't force my way in," she snapped. I slowly pointed toward the shattered door behind her, the broken hinges, the splintered frame. The wood scattered across the floor. The live stream camera followed my finger. Her viewers were now staring directly at the evidence. For the first time since she arrived, she looked slightly uncomfortable. "That door was already damaged," she said quickly. It was a weak excuse, and she knew it. But before I could respond, a new voice spoke. Calm, measured, authoritative. "Ma'am," the man at the table said quietly. Karen froze. She turned slowly. For the first time since bursting into the cabin, she finally noticed him. He closed the folder in front of him and folded his hands on the table. "I've been listening to you for the past 3 minutes," he said. Her expression shifted instantly. The confidence, the smug attitude, the performative energy, all of it paused just slightly, because something about his voice made it clear he wasn't just some random guest. "And you are?" she asked cautiously. The man reached into his suit jacket and calmly placed a small leather badge holder on the table. He flipped it open. Even from across the room, the gold seal was unmistakable. Her live stream camera caught it too, and suddenly the chat must have gone completely insane, because Karen's eyes widened just a little. The man looked at her with polite professionalism. "Before you call the sheriff," he said evenly, "you might want to know who you just broke into a house in front of." For the first time since she kicked the door open, Karen stopped talking. The room went quiet in a way that almost felt heavy. Her phone was still pointed toward the table, still streaming live to thousands of people who had been watching her raid with excitement just seconds ago. But now, the energy had shifted, because the man sitting across from me slowly slid the leather badge holder across the table, and Karen's camera captured every inch of it. The gold seal caught the sunlight coming through the broken doorway. Karen leaned forward slightly, squinting. At first her expression was confused, then skeptical, and then something else, something closer to panic. She cleared her throat. "Okay," she said slowly, forcing a small laugh for her live stream. "What is this supposed to be?" The man didn't react. He just watched her calmly. She looked back down at the badge again. The words were clear. Estate Attorney General. Office of the Attorney General. Her smile twitched, but instead of backing down, she did what people like her always do when they realize they might be wrong. She doubled down. "Oh wow," she said sarcastically to the camera. "Look at that. Now he's pretending to know the Attorney General." A few nervous chuckles slipped out of her. "This is getting better and better." She looked back at the man. "Sir," she said firmly, "you can't just flash a fake badge and intimidate HOA officials. That's illegal." The man raised an eyebrow slightly. "Is it?" he asked calmly. Karen nodded aggressively. "Yes, it absolutely is." Her phone buzzed with incoming comments. She glanced at the screen quickly and laughed again. "Oh my gosh, you guys are seeing this, right?" she said to the live stream. "He thinks a badge is going to scare me." I leaned back in my chair and watched the whole thing unfold, because I already knew what was about to happen. And honestly, it was going to be painful to watch. The man slowly reached for the badge again, but instead of putting it away, he turned it so the camera could see it more clearly. "Ma'am," he said in the same calm tone, "I'm not pretending to know the Attorney General." Karen crossed her arms. "Then what are you doing?" He paused for just a second. Then he said something that made the entire room feel like it had just dropped 10 degrees. "I be Attorney General." Silence. Absolute silence. Karen blinked. Once, twice. Her mouth opened slightly. Then she laughed. Not a confident laugh. More like the kind of laugh someone makes when their brain refuses to process new information. "Okay," she said, shaking her head. "That's funny. That's actually really funny." She turned the camera back toward herself. "Chat, he's claiming he's the Attorney General now." Her smile looked a little strained. But then the man calmly reached into his jacket again. This time he pulled out a second item, a wallet. He opened it slowly and slid an official identification card across the table. The state seal, his photo, his name, his title, everything. Karen stared down at it, and suddenly, she stopped breathing through her mouth. Her live stream chat must have exploded, because her phone began vibrating rapidly in her hand. Her eyes flicked down to the screen, then back to the ID, then back to the ID, then back to the screen again. The color in her face started draining. "Wait," she murmured. Her voice sounded smaller now. She leaned closer to the table, squinting at the ID, like it might magically change if she stared long enough. You're not actually." "I am," he said gently. The room stayed quiet. Even the birds outside had stopped chirping. Karen's livestream camera was still running, capturing every second of her expression as reality slowly caught up with her. But why would the Attorney General be here?" she stammered. "That's a good question," he replied. He folded his hands again. "I was meeting with the property owner regarding a legal matter involving lakefront zoning regulations." Karen slowly turned her head toward me. For the first time since she arrived, she looked unsure. "You're the property owner?" she asked. I shrugged slightly. "Technically my family is," I said. Her eyes widened again. Then the Attorney General continued, "And while we were discussing that matter, he said calmly, 'You forced entry into a private residence, destroyed a door, and began broadcasting the event online.'" Karen's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. She looked down. The chat was no longer cheering her on. Messages were flying past, so fast they were almost unreadable. "Is that actually him? You just broke into the Jeeves meeting?" "Turn the camera around again." Karen swallowed hard. "Fad, this is a misunderstanding," she said quickly. Her voice was completely different now. The confidence was gone. The performance was gone. She looked at the Attorney General nervously. "I was just enforcing HOA bylaws." The Attorney General nodded slowly. "I see." Then he gestured toward the broken door behind her. "And do your bylaws usually involve kicking in doors?" For a moment, nobody moved. Karen stood there in the middle of my living room, still holding her phone up, still live streaming to thousands of viewers who had just watched her go from *HOA hero to someone who might have just broken into the worst possible house in the entire county. The broken door creaked slightly in the breeze, and the Attorney General sat calmly at the table like this was just another Tuesday. Karen's eyes kept bouncing between three things: the badge, the official ID, and the shattered door behind her. You could practically see the gears in her head spinning, desperately trying to find some version of reality where she wasn't in serious trouble. Then suddenly she forced a laugh. "Oh, wow," she said nervously, glancing at the live stream chat again. Okay, everyone relax." She waved her hand like she was dismissing the entire situation. "This is clearly just a misunderstanding." No one replied. Not me, not the Attorney General. The silence made her talk faster. "I mean, obviously I didn't know there was some kind of meeting happening here," she continued. "If someone had just answered the door when I knocked." "You didn't knock." The Attorney General said it so calmly, it almost sounded polite. Karen froze. "Well, I mean, you forced entry." Her lips pressed together. "Under HOA authority," she snapped quickly, clinging to the one argument she still had. "Our bylaws clearly state that the board can inspect properties suspected of violations." She said it louder now, almost like she was trying to convince the live stream audience. "And this property has had multiple complaints." She turned the phone toward the Attorney General. "Yes, you heard that right," she said to the camera. "Multiple violations." Then she spun the camera back to me. "Unauthorized dock expansion. Illegal fire pit installation, occupying the property during a restricted transfer period." She looked back at the Attorney General with a confident nod. So yes, I entered the property to investigate. The Attorney General didn't interrupt her. He let her finish. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "are you familiar with the concept of probable cause?" Karen blinked. "Of course I am," she said defensively. "And are you familiar with private property rights?" "Yes." "And trespassing laws?" Her jaw tightened. "Yes." "Good," he said. Then he gently tapped the table once. Because none of those things disappear just because someone is part of an HOA. Karen's live-stream chat must have exploded again. Her phone started buzzing non-stop. She glanced down quickly. Her expression shifted. The same audience that had been cheering her on earlier was now flooding the chat with messages like, "You cannot break into house. This is illegal. End the stream. You're in serious trouble." Karen quickly flipped the camera away from the chat again. Her voice was noticeably tighter now. "Look, I was doing my job." The Attorney General nodded slowly. "I understand." Then he gestured towards the door. "However, doing your job usually doesn't involve property damage." Karen's shoulders stiffened. That door was already... He raised one finger. "Careful." Just that single word stopped her mid-sentence. Because suddenly it wasn't just a conversation. "Why more?" It sounded more like a warning. "You are currently broadcasting a live video," he continued calmly. Karen's eyes flicked to the phone again. "And in that video," he said, "you clearly kicked in a private residence door." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "And then," he continued, "you entered the home without permission." She swallowed and began accusing the homeowner of crimes without verifying ownership, while thousands of people watched. The silence in the room got heavier. Karen slowly lowered the phone a few inches, not enough to stop streaming, just enough that her hand wouldn't be shaking as much. "I didn't know who he was," she said quietly. The Attorney General nodded. "That's exactly the problem." He leaned forward slightly. "And you didn't ask." Karen looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from under her. "But there were complaints," she insisted weakly. "From who?" he asked. She hesitated. "Neighbors." "Which neighbors?" Another pause. "I don't have the list with me." "Interesting," he replied. Then he glanced at me briefly before looking back at her. "Because we've actually been reviewing HOA enforcement complaints across the county." Karen's eyes widened slightly. "This particular HOA," he added calmly, "has come up several times. The livestream chat must have gone absolutely insane." Karen's phone vibrated so much it nearly slipped out of her hand. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. The Attorney General folded his hands again. "I mean," he said evenly, "that your little inspection today may have just created a much bigger investigation." Karen went completely still, and for the first time since she burst into the cabin, she looked genuinely afraid. Karen's livestream was still running, and that might have been the worst mistake she'd made so far, because now the entire internet was watching her slowly realize that the situation she had stormed into with confidence was turning into something much bigger. Her hand was trembling slightly as she held the phone. Not dramatically, just enough that the camera wobbled a little. The chat was flying past so fast it looked like a waterfall of text. Thousands of comments, questions, warnings, people tagging reporters, people tagging lawyers, people typing things like, "You just confessed to breaking in. This is going to court. Turn off the stream." Karen swallowed hard. "You said investigation," she said quietly, looking at the Attorney General again. The confidence she had when she kicked in the door was completely gone now. "What investigation?" The Attorney General didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for the folder that had been sitting on the table since before Karen arrived. A thick folder. One of those official government ones with small colored tabs sticking out from the sides. He opened it slowly. Paper shifted. Karen's eyes locked onto the documents like someone watching a bomb technician work. "I mentioned earlier," he said calmly, that we've been reviewing HOA enforcement complaints across the county. Karen tried to keep her posture steady. Yes, she said. Well, he continued, flipping a page, your association has appeared in several of those complaints. Her face stiffened. That's ridiculous, she said quickly. Is it? He slid one page slightly forward. Unauthorized fines. Karen crossed her arms. That's standard enforcement. He flipped another page. Selective rule enforcement. That's just people being upset about losing disputes. Another page turned. Harassment complaints. Karen's jaw tightened. Those are exaggerated. Then he turned one more page, and this time he rotated the document so it faced her. Karen leaned forward slightly. Her eyes moved across the page, and the color drained from her face again. What is that? She asked quietly. It's a complaint filed 2 months ago, he said. By who? She demanded. 3 homeowners. Karen shook her head immediately. They're troublemakers. They've been violating HOA rules for years. The Attorney General nodded slightly. That may be. Then he tapped the document gently. But their complaint includes something interesting. Karen's throat tightened. What? Video footage. For a moment, Karen looked confused. Then her eyes slowly drifted toward the phone in her hand. Still live streaming. Still recording everything. The Attorney General followed her gaze. Yes, he said calmly, like that. Karen's breathing got a little faster. This is different, she insisted. How? She hesitated. I was enforcing rules. The Attorney General leaned back again. Ma'am, you kicked in a door. Karen didn't respond. You entered a home without permission. Still nothing. You publicly accused the homeowner of illegal activity. Silence. And you broadcast the entire thing online. Karen finally looked down at the floor. Outside, a car drove slowly past the cabin on the lake road. It didn't stop, but the moment reminded everyone in the room that the world outside was still moving, while Karen's situation was rapidly falling apart. Look, she said quietly, I didn't know who was inside. That's not a defense, the Attorney General replied. It's actually part of the problem. Karen's eyes darted up again. What do you mean? It means, he said calmly, that you entered a property without verifying anything. He gestured toward the broken door. You assumed you had authority. Karen said nothing. And now, he continued, you've potentially provided evidence of trespassing, property damage, and harassment on a public live stream. Karen's phone buzzed violently again. She finally looked down at it. Her viewer count had tripled. Messages were pouring in faster than she could read. Some of them included links, news sites, local reporters, legal commentary. Someone had even posted the Attorney General's official government profile next to the live stream screenshot. Karen's fingers tightened around the phone. Maybe we should stop filming, she muttered. The Attorney General gave a small shrug. That would probably be wise. For the first time since she arrived, Karen actually looked embarrassed. She fumbled with the screen. Then finally, the live stream ended. The room suddenly felt quieter, but the damage had already been done. Karen slowly lowered the phone to her side. What happens now? She asked quietly. What happens now? She asked quietly. The Attorney General closed the folder. Well, he said calmly, that depends on how cooperative you plan to be. And somehow that answer sounded even more terrifying than if he had threatened her. The moment the live stream ended, the cabin felt completely different. A few seconds earlier, thousands of strangers had been watching every second of Karen's meltdown. Now it was just the 3 of us. The broken door, the quiet lake outside, and a silence so heavy you could practically hear Karen thinking. Her phone was still in her hand, but she wasn't looking at it anymore. She was staring at the floor, trying to figure out how a routine HOA inspection had somehow turned into a meeting with the State Attorney General. Finally, she spoke. So, what does being cooperative mean? She asked quietly. The Attorney General didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the thick folder in front of him and folded his hands together. First, he said calmly, "It means we're going to clarify exactly what happened." "Ed, today?" Karen nodded quickly. "Yes, of course." He gestured toward the shattered door. "Start there." Karen inhaled slowly. "I received complaints from neighbors about violations at this property," she began. "What kind of complaints?" he asked. "Construction violations. Noise complaints, unauthorized modifications." The Attorney General looked toward me briefly. I shrugged. He turned back to her. "And your response was to break in?" "I didn't break in," she said automatically. Then she glanced at the door again. Her voice weakened. "I forced entry." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because no one answered." The Attorney General raised an eyebrow. "How long did you wait?" Karen blinked. "Well, I knocked. That wasn't my question." She shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe 30 seconds. I couldn't help it." I laughed, not loudly, just enough that she heard it. Her eyes flashed toward me. "You didn't answer the door," she snapped. "I was in a meeting," I said calmly. She gestured around the room. "With him?" "Yes." The Attorney General spoke again. "Did you consider contacting the homeowner first?" Karen crossed her arms. "We sent violation notices." "By mail?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "And did you verify whether the property owner had received them?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought," he said quietly. Karen's shoulders sank slightly. Then he leaned forward a little. "Second," he continued, "being cooperative means providing HOA documentation." Karen blinked. "What documentation?" "Your bylaws, enforcement procedures, violation notices, fine records." Her eyes widened. "That's internal HOA material." "Correct. And you're asking for it?" "I'm requesting it as part of a review." Karen shifted again. "That would require approval from the HOA board." "Then you should probably contact them," he replied calmly. Wren didn't move. For the first time since this conversation started, she looked like she was genuinely considering something. Then she spoke again. "Are we in legal trouble?" The Attorney General paused. Not dramatically, just long enough that the question hung in the air. "That depends," he said. "On what?" "On whether today was an isolated incident, or part of a pattern." Karen looked down again, because deep down, she probably already knew the answer. Then suddenly, I heard something outside, a car engine, slow, approaching the cabin. Karen heard it too. Her head turned toward the broken doorway. A black SUV rolled past the trees and stopped near the driveway. Karen frowned. "Are those—" Before she could finish the sentence, two people stepped out of the vehicle, both wearing dark jackets, both carrying small folders. Karen's eyes widened again. "Oh no," she whispered. The Attorney General didn't even look surprised. In fact, he almost looked like he had been expecting them. "Perfect timing," he said calmly. Karen turned back to him quickly. "You called them?" He nodded. "I asked a couple members of my office to stop by." The two officials began walking toward the cabin. Karen looked like someone who had just realized the meeting was getting much bigger than she expected. "What are they here for?" she asked nervously. The Attorney General stood up slowly. "To document what happened today." Karen's face went pale. "They're investigators?" she asked. "Partially." The footsteps outside got closer. Wood creaked on the cabin porch. Karen's breathing sped up. "This is insane," she muttered. Then she looked at the door again. The broken hinges, the splintered frame, the evidence sitting right there for anyone to see. The porch boards creaked once more. A knock sounded on the side wall near the doorway. One of the officials spoke from outside. "Attorney General?" Karen closed her eyes for a second, like someone bracing for impact, and the Attorney General calmly replied, "Come on in." The investigators didn't hesitate. The moment the Attorney General said, "Come on in," the two officials stepped through the broken doorway and immediately stopped just inside the cabin. and the first thing they both looked at was the door, or what used to be the door. Splintered wood, bent hinges, chunks of the frame scattered across the floor. One of them slowly raised an eyebrow. "Well," he muttered, pulling a small notebook from his jacket. "That answers the first question." Karen stood completely still. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest now, like she was trying to physically hold herself together. "This is ridiculous," she said under her breath. The second investigator stepped forward and looked around the room calmly. Then he glanced at the Attorney General. "Is this the homeowner?" he asked, nodding toward me. "Yes," the Attorney General replied. The investigator gave me a quick professional nod. "Sir." Then he turned toward Karen. "And you are?" Karen lifted her chin slightly. "I'm the president of the HOA. The two investigators exchanged a quick glance. Not shocked, not impressed, just acknowledging the information. "And you forced entry?" the first investigator asked. Karen immediately shook her head. "I was conducting an HOA property inspection." The investigator slowly gestured toward the destroyed door again. "With your foot!" Karen didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the Attorney General like she expected him to step in and clarify something. He didn't. In fact, he had quietly stepped back near the table, letting the investigators take over, which meant Karen was now explaining her actions directly to them, and it wasn't going "we." "Oh, look," she said quickly. "This property has multiple violations." The investigator scribbled something in his notebook such as unauthorized construction, noise complaints, occupancy violations. He nodded slightly. "And those violations authorized you to break into the home?" Karen hesitated again. "Well, technically the HOA has enforcement authority." "Over fines," he said calmly. "Not doors." Karen's mouth tightened. The second investigator stepped closer to the door frame and crouched slightly to examine the damage. "Fresh break," he said. "Within the last hour." Karen exhaled loudly. "You're acting like I committed some kind of crime." Both investigators looked at her. Then one of them spoke in the calmest tone possible. "Ma'am, kicking in someone's door usually qualifies." Karen's face turned red. "That's not what happened." The investigator stood up again and brushed a small wood chip off his sleeve. "Then, what did happen?" Karen opened her mouth, paused, closed it again, because every version of the story now sounded worse than the last. Meanwhile, the Attorney General calmly picked up the folder from the table again. He flipped it open and slid one document toward the investigators. "This is the complaint record we discussed earlier," he said. One of the investigators skimmed the page. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "Multiple harassment complaints," he said. Karen looked like someone had just punched her in the stomach. "Those are exaggerated." "Maybe," the investigator replied. Then he glanced toward the broken doorway again. "But today's incident doesn't help your case." Karen ran hand through her hair. "This is insane," she muttered. "No," the Attorney General said quietly from the table. "This is documentation." The word hung in the room like a weight, because that's exactly what this had become. Not an argument, not a neighborhood dispute. Documentation, evidence, records. Karen looked at the investigators again. "So what happens now?" The first investigator closed his notebook. "Right now," he gestured toward the door, "we're going to document the property damage." He nodded toward Karen. "And your statement?" She blinked. "My statement? Yes." Karen's voice dropped. "Am I being charged with something?" The investigators exchanged another quick glance. Then one of them said something that made the entire situation feel very real. "Today? Probably not." Karen exhaled slightly in relief. But then he finished the sentence. Yet, her shoulders dropped again. Outside, the wind moved gently across the lake. Inside, the Attorney General closed his folder one final time. Then he looked directly at Karen. "Your HOA has been mentioned in several complaints," he said calmly. "And today you provided something investigators rarely get. Karen swallowed. What? He gestured toward the broken doorway. Proof. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then the second investigator quietly took a photo of the shattered door frame. The flash lit the room for a brief second, and in that moment, Karen finally seemed to understand something. This wasn't a confrontation she could argue her way out of. It wasn't a live stream she could control. It wasn't even really about the door anymore. It was about everything that door represented. Power, authority, and what happens when someone thinks they have too much of both. The investigator lowered the camera, closed his folder, and said the one sentence that ended the entire scene. "Ma'am, we'll be in touch."